And I think that's the part that we don't see enough and or discussed enough, that yes, you may be a guy may be in a position where he is acknowledged as being, or maybe even self-professed as being, the head of household, the one who takes lead and command, um, but at the same time making sure to realize that you're only in that position because other people trust you.
Hola, everybody. This is Lucelania.
Hey, what's up? This is Steph coming at you live.
And this is Sex and Sensuality for the Churchy podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome again to Sex and Sensuality for the Churchy. So, the topic for today is, just because a guy is in a position of control or has been made to feel like he's in a position of control in a relationship, should the word control really mean, or lead really mean, I take on the brunt of everything that happens in a relationship, good or bad or in between? The fact that he is a guy. And what does that look like for a relationship when he doesn't have to feel the weight of the lead, command, the captain, the guy who cleans, takes care of everything? Like, what does that look like for us? Let me know what you think.
That's a really good question, because I think as cis het women, especially because we're talking about romantic relationships, if we want to fight the patriarchy, then we also have to really take into consideration how we show up, the expectations that we might have of men, and how we are either participating, that's the word I'm looking for, participating in the patriarchy in the ways that we think, or that we feel are beneficial to us. And so how does that work? Either it's like either we don't want men to have power over us, or we do. And if they do,
and where's the matriarchy?
Right. What does that mean? And so it's like, and how do we balance out the power in relationships if that is the goal?
And that is a harder thing to figure out, because sometimes I know that there are guys that I know that for them it is an or all kind of situation. I'm the guy, I make all the decisions, I'm the protector, and the woman in their life, and I'm specifically the woman in their lives, is just the person who's there to benefit from all the wonderful things that comes from me being in control, right? Being and having that patriarchy in place, not realizing that it actually creates dynamics that actually hurts me, right? Because when I just have the patriarchy, then the matriarchy, right? Like if one is below the other versus one is next to each other, right? That's a whole different dynamic, because here we hold responsibility regardless of what happens between both of us, right? Versus when it's like this, it hits me first, right? And anything that I do is supposed to impact you, versus what happens when I can't function this way, when it should be more, okay, sometimes I need to make a decision and lead, and sometimes you need to make a decision and you lead. Is that possible when I believe that I have to be in control and command and be strong and live this ideal life as a man, right?
So that brings me to something that a video I watched from the Jude 3 Project. Look them up; they're really great resource as we decolonize and deconstruct. But this one doctor, and I can't remember her name, and I'm not about to look it up. But this one doctor talked about the word helpmeet, and in the Bible specifically, and how we use it in terms of relationships, where that we're talking about in the sense of a woman being submissive to her husband, a wife being submissive to her husband, and that she's his helpmeet, which historically has meant that he is the head, and she is subservient to him as the wife, as the helpmeet. Where she intrigued me was, she's like, that is not the only place in the Bible that the actual word for helpmeet, I want to say she's an aizer. I'm gonna look it up and I'll put it in the show notes, the correct word, but the Hebrew word for it is used in other places in the Bible, essentially. And that instance, when we're talking about a helpmeet as a woman, that is the only time in the Bible that is meant that the person is subservient. There are two other instances in several different places where she says that root word is either meant to is actually talking about God. And then the other instance is that they're talking about, that root word is talking about an alliance, like a military alliance. And so in some instances, it's referring to God, the divine being. And then in other instances, talking about a partnership in war, in battle. But the only time that we make that mean that a woman is lesser than a man is when it is used in terms of a marital relationship. So maybe it wasn't, and we've applied misogyny in that scripture specifically, but the intention was never to talk about a wife as being subservient, but to talk about her in terms of her divinity and as a partner. Someone that you trust with your life. Because if I'm making a military alliance with someone, I'm trusting them with my life as much as they're trusting me with theirs. And this is someone I'm not going to make an alliance with someone on the battlefield that is not capable and skilled and strong and powerful. And so, but that also means that, without being like a military strategist, I imagine it's like, but to have a successful alliance, it's about knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses and knowing the other person's strengths and other person's weaknesses and knowing that they're, how that person shows up today versus how I can meet them where they are today, where that might be a strength for them, but maybe they're exhausted. And because I'm your partner, there's an ebb and flow to it versus a rigid system of hierarchy. That even if you as a man are the head of the house, and a lot of the times, you hear that conversation in terms of, again, power, where the person who makes the most money has the most power. The person who, or the dumbass arguments of who gets the biggest piece of chicken and who gets Fred first and who gets the table, all of these symbolic things that are supposed to say, this is the most important person in this house.
Which is really, when you think about it, the part that really protects the patriarchy, right? Because in reality, you're telling everybody else around you that, hey, I need to be protected because I'm technically protecting all of you. You're relying on me to think and make these decisions in order to benefit all of you. So as a result, I have to be higher on the table, on the hierarchy of things, because you all benefit from it. Mm-hmm. And it's the fact that you bring in the military aspect of it and how it's used in that regard. I mean, regardless of the fact, there has to be trust, right? Regardless of what situation you're in, you hope that the person you consider to be the head of your house, or whatever case may be, you can trust them to make decisions that will protect you, benefit you, and keep you safe. But how many times do we see that that's not the case, right? You have the title, but you don't have the responsibility. And it's almost kind of like by default, because of the fact that I'm just a guy, and I walked into the door and, hey, and also, like, and it wasn't even a conversation that was ever had.
And it's crazy because when you were saying that, it was two things that came to me. The first thing that came to me was how much society, even our family, even our mothers, teach us not to trust women. Whether it's watching our mother and how she treats, the women in her life, her friends, her family, and we see how we use gossip as currency, and that shows you that women aren't to be trusted. Whether it's the mother who, treats her son bad and, maybe takes out her trauma because of her father or men on their son. And now it's like, I can't trust women because the one person that I can't trust because you treated me. But even in how we talk about women in society and movies, that women are too emotional, they're bad with money, they're this, that, and the other. But then I think about the contradiction of that. because we won't trust them, but yet you also see how much men will trust a woman to keep their drug money, to do their drug runs, to be ride or die. That takes trust in there.
Mm-hmm.
To be the
It
ride or
does.
die bitch. But too often it's like, I trust you with that, and that trust is at the expense of your safety. Like you said, your safety, and I'm not protecting you, but I trust you to protect me.
Mm-hmm. I really
how one-sided that is. Even though we'll say women aren't to be trusted, women this and the other, but how many women are sitting in prison because of a man they were dating? How many Black women are sitting in prison either because she wouldn't snitch, or because it just looked like, she was the one that was carrying it for him, thinking that she would, she'll get a lighter sentence than he would, and I'm gonna protect the Black man.
While you were saying all of this, I kept thinking to myself that there are situations where the matriarchy, whoever that is, the grandmother, the mother, whoever, right? Everybody acknowledges her strength, acknowledge her wisdom, acknowledge the things that she does in keeping together both the relationship of whoever she's with or even the family, right? Mm-hmm. And it makes me wonder. I feel like women can operate in both realms, right? They can switch between being the matriarchy that is subversive or submissive, but then part of the matriarchy that is also the leader, right? That takes command. And I wonder sometimes if, for men, I think, are we given this sense of the patriarchy just because of the fact that maybe our egos can't handle being anything less? Like, is it, in some ways, is it like, let's just say you're in charge, because we know that if you're not in charge, you're going to have a fit, right? So we're going to let you feel like you're in control. But behind the scenes, we all know who really runs the picture, right? And I wonder how much of that is really true, right? That even though we would like to believe that, yes, the guy is in command, taking charge or whatever, but you can't take charge by yourself, right? Like, you need people to do that. And
I wonder how much
of it is.
Go ahead. Yeah, it is a lot.
How much power do we really have?
Yeah, it is a lot of ego, but I think a lot of it is ego, and a lot of it is performative, because of the fact that in a lot of ways outside of the home, in order to survive, we as Black people, but specifically we're talking about men and Black men, where y'all are, it's like you have to, you're playing small, you're giving up your power, you are, submitting to the proverbial white man, whether that's at your job or the police or just, white supremacy as the man. And so you come home, and because of how small that makes you feel, you come home and you want to, your ego is saying, I need to feel like this place is affirming me in another way. And so, and we don't want our men to feel that way. And so whether they are or not, and at the most toxic and dangerous, you get those men who do it out of, who do it and enact it out of abuse. That we know that rape, we know that, domestic violence is about power. It's not about sex. It's about power. And so you have those either because they've taught or they just had unregulated emotions or whatever, that they will, their ego is saying that, that no one in their life, their girlfriend, wife, whatever, baby mama, children are allowed to make them feel like they are not in control. And I will have it by any means necessary. But we also know every man ain't out here beating on their wives and their kids. And that there's a lot of emotional type of things that happen to, or even just withholding. Like the idea of a term, thanks to TikTok, the TikTok University, weaponizing competence, which looks like a woman telling a man, hey, I need you to, can you help me out? That idea of, I need you to help me with with our kids, but help me out and get the baby dressed. And you literally, there was a video that I saw last year where he puts on the baby's clothes and it's like inside out backwards. And we're like, for real? But the idea of, oh, I don't want to do it, so I'm going to do it wrong. So the next time because she wants it done a certain way, she won't ask me to do it because either I mess up the dishes, I mess up the clothes, or in the washer, because I'm just too stupid. And maybe you don't know. Maybe you've never done it before, you don't know, but you're also an adult.
There's a few.
Read instruction, Google, whatever the case might be. And then when she gets mad, oh, she nags too much. And it's like, come on. Like, we know emotionally, but just the second shift of the labor in the house. And she even got to ask you for help with the house that you also live in, with the kids that you also have responsibility for. And then you're going to do something like that. That's about power. And likely the ego of, I'm the man, I shouldn't have to do this.
I mean, and as you're saying all of this, there's like so many dynamics that are coming into play, right? Because the idea of control and power isn't just a logical construct, right? There's the physical construct of it as well. There's the guys who, because not every guy is a football player out here, just big enough to like take out a whole house. Environmental things that we grow up with that tells me or tells guys that you're meant to be a leader. You're meant to be in charge. And when you're not, then and then unfortunately, what's synonymous with not being, weak? And when you think about weak, you think about women. It's like, and
let's be real.
We fight so hard.
Having a dick does not automatically make you a leader. Having a vagina don't make you automatically a leader either. But we don't really expect women to be leaders. We expect that men means leadership, and there are a lot of things that we as a culture celebrate when a man does it and call it leadership, as far as being assertive and being this and being that. But leadership is about integrity. Leadership is also about partnership. Because no leader, like the leaders of these Fortune 500 companies, don't know how to do every single job. They don't have to. They delegate. They have to trust the people under them to do their job and do it well and motivate them. And there's so much there that is a leader other than just being a man. It's just that historically women were excluded from those places, so you couldn't see women be leaders in corporate America up until recently, or see leaders in churches up until recently. And then we know that there are still some places, some churches, that still don't allow women to be leaders because they feel like
you're pumping out babies.
Right. You don't have time. And I'm like, you understand how much leadership skills it takes to run a household? And for all those moving pieces to come together, and then and let's be honest, we supposed to do all that and still hang from the same chandelier and suck your dick like Superhead. And then when we don't, it's like, how dare you be tired? How dare you not be interested? How dare you be apathetic to having sex with your husband? Never mind the fact that there was just a study that was published by NYU where they finally are admitting that depression does look different in Black women. And one of the things was how much exhaustion and stress exacerbates apathy to having sex.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are, Black women in all manner of relationships where it's like, oh, she got attitude, she this, that, and the other, she just don't want to have sex. No, baby, she's depressed. But you don't care about that. You care about what you're not getting.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, because
the balance.
We didn't even know that that's what that is, because it's like, oh, here it is, another angry Black woman. Because for us, depression can look like irritability. It could look like, anxiety. There's so many other things, and it's like, yeah, it does show. It's not just because we will do what we got to do as opposed to thinking, oh, depression looks the same for everybody, and that means that you're in the bed and you can't move. And, and for some of us as Black women, that happens. But overwhelmingly, they're seeing out of the study that it's not necessarily that. And I imagine, because I haven't read it, I want to read it, but I wonder how much of that is really an adaptation of not being able to rest, because our ancestors were not allowed to rest.
There's so much going on.
We were not allowed to rest. You couldn't rest. You have a baby and you was right back out on that field or in the kitchen or wherever you was. So our depression adapted to our circumstances. We had no choice.
The same way now.
Yeah, your life was literally, you thought that you was going to sleep in because you're depressed. That was never, no, get your ass up. Mm-hmm. And so, I would imagine that, us as present day, that we are carrying around this literal trauma response, that our depression even looks different because we have never been allowed to rest. That they got like something of the Nat ministry where it's like that rest is revolutionary for us. Because when do we actually get permission that even as kids, you think about, come on, as Caribbean children, don't ever let your parents them see you resting.
Sleeping in.
Get up and clean something. That you got something that needs to be done. And so you learn, you gotta stay out the house. If you could be out, you're gonna be out the house, because if you inside and they think that you're resting, you're bored. Oh, they're gonna give you something to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it all comes with knowing that the intention behind it, right? That somehow is somewhat communicated, versus if you go back to just the idea of the guy being in charge just because, right? It doesn't work because there's no communication between expectations. There's no communication about what does it even look like. It's just your guy, and you should just be in charge just for the sake of being in charge. And that, I think, creates its own stress, because now, like you said, so you have a guy who has no idea what he's supposed to be doing, but he's just going to keep pretending that he's in charge, right? And then you have the woman who says, hey, like, there are things that, yes, I would like for you to take command of and participate in, but because of the way things are going, I don't know how to communicate that, and or I may be stuck in my own ways that I grew up where you didn't question. It was just, he's the man, you're the woman, y'all do your thing, he's in charge, you follow him. And if something happens to him, you get to be in charge only until he comes back.
and that is one of the ways that I want men to understand, like, that is one of the ways that perpetuating that patriarchy harms you. Because even if you wanted to take something off your plate, you don't feel like you can, because you've been taught that as the man, you are supposed to be the one that carries all the weight. And she might think, either because she was taught that that's what's supposed to be, or she thinks because you don't open up to her, that you're fine. And really, you're dying on the inside with all the pressure and the stress and the lack of rest, because that's not allowed. To be seen as respected, as valued as a man, it means being able to provide and fix and have all the answers, and never ever showing any kind of vulnerability. You got it all together. And and it's just like, but that's also why it's important that hopefully you're in a place where both of you are willing to do the work. So if you do get the courage to be vulnerable and see, this isn't working for me, that hopefully, I pray that she's a woman that is not like, if you don't shut the fuck up and stop complaining.
Yeah, because those exist too, right? You get shunned for operating in a moment of vulnerability and being open. And the moment, and I tell you, I think for a lot of guys, it's like, you just need to tell me one time. Tell me one time that me being other than what I think I should be doesn't work. Oh, you want me to stay quiet? No problem. I'll stay quiet. You don't want me to share stuff anymore? No problem. Keep it to myself. Not realizing the damage that it's doing, because now you've given that person permission to be this way, right? You've made it clear to me that you don't want me to be. And some will take it that way. Some will take it as, she told me not to say nothing no more. So
And that's real. It's also a little frustrating because it's like really, like, y'all fuses that short, that one time. But not to, try to be very careful in the way I say this, because it can be perceived as, I'm not trying to diminish their experience of it, but understanding that your feelings about a circumstance doesn't mean that that's what was actually happening. And so maybe she was directly shutting you down. Maybe she was exhausted and her response was bad, but that wasn't necessarily her intention. But if you received it that way and you're like, oh, she don't care. I tried to open. She told me she wanted me to open up, and I tried. But, and so it becomes, again, then you go back into that, are you're withholding to punish her because of power, and it's like, yeah, like, okay, like, but I will always be the kind of woman, because this is how I live my life, to call us out, to be like, hey, if we want men to do better as we're healing and evolving, then we gotta interrogate this stuff, but also understanding that in that growth and that evolution for men, that they gotta be more have more fortitude emotionally, that just because you tried one time and her response was not the best, that you don't use that as an excuse to recoil. And of course it depends on the relationship, but if you have made a commitment to this person, it's like you recoil and be like, I tried once and never again. Like, never again. At some point, really you gotta have some level of persistence. And not because you're gonna beat her over the head with it, but it's like, okay, maybe I didn't choose the right time. Maybe I need, maybe I'm not, am I communicating? Does she understand what I'm saying? Do we need help with our communication? A third party? Like, there's so many other avenues that could be tried, but overwhelmingly, from a woman's perspective, what I hear is that all it takes is one time. And if I come to you and I don't feel like, and I try to be vulnerable and this and the other, and it's like, it just feels like an opportunity to see, you didn't, and it's like, where's the understanding that, you know what, maybe she didn't know how to respond because this is the only time that you've ever done this, and she's a little taken aback, and we both are learning.
Yes, I'll say yes to listen. I'll say yes to many of that, but I'll also say that it may not be the first time. It may just be the first time that they've expressed it, but like the other women in their lives may have always constituted and allowed that to be okay. So the moment I think that I'm going to be with someone who should be able to then allow me to do it, and they don't receive it well, I think it's not so much that it's just them as much as it's all the previous other times that they've experienced that made being that way excusable. And it almost kind of, it's like, it's less I think it's less of the fact of I asked you and you weren't available, as much as maybe I'm just hurt and now I don't know how to deal with it, and the only way that I do know how to deal with it is to go back to my old ways.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what it is. It's the defense mechanism. It's, oh, I tried, and she triggered a wound that someone else opened. But how often do we tell women, stop taking us, stop punishing me for what somebody else did to you? And if we're really, really honest, it's for most of us, maybe even all of us, what it's triggering and what those wounds that other people in relationships are triggering is a childhood wound. And the first person who wounded us was in that place was likely someone who raised us. And that's why we respond like that, because as a child, which makes sense, because we don't know any better. You learn based off of the people raising you, what you need to do in order to get your needs met. And if they're telling you that being vulnerable, either because they've told you or because they don't model it, or both, which likely for us as Black people, it was both, that you don't get your needs met by being weak and sharing your emotions and crying, and not understanding, because we are children, that they just literally wounded us, and then we replay that same scenario with everyone after, because subconsciously we were taught, there's a psychologist that I remember that's like, there's a certain period of childhood that our experiences and the things that our parents tell us, and I use parents as in anybody who raised you, it's almost the same as being hypnotized. That it has that effect on us. That even if somebody wasn't doing it intentionally, that those formative years creates your persona, and we live that out. And until we get to a place where we have an awakening, where we realize all the ways that we've been living out that trauma and begin to make efforts to change it, we'll do that. We might try because we want to believe this person is different. But because we haven't really healed to understand so that we can change the kind of people that we are entertaining, of course they're going to respond the same. That's like me having abandonment issues and realizing that I constantly am settling for men who are unavailable. And so I'm living out my fear and performing, but really it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because they were unavailable and we're always going to be unavailable. As opposed to healing that part of me. So not to say that I'm not going to attract those kind of men, but before I become emotionally involved with them, that I realize that they're unavailable and I don't give them the time of day. And so then when I start dealing with a man who is available emotionally and I become vulnerable with him, he's going to respond differently. Then he may not be perfect, but he's going to respond differently than the man who's emotionally unavailable, because now I'm not replaying my childhood trauma with every man that I pick.
I'll leave with this, saying that it is possible, and I've seen it, where the matriarchy, patriarchy can exist together at the same time without one negating the other, right? And I think that's the part that we don't see enough or discussed enough. That yes, you may be a guy may be in a position where he is acknowledged as being, or maybe even self-professed as being, the head of household, the one who takes lead and command, but at the same time making sure to realize that you're only in that position because other people trust you, right? And just as much as you may be in a position of power or leadership or whatever way you want to define it, it doesn't mean that you have to then deal with it all alone, right? And I think that's the part that can be hard, is that leaders a lot of times have to make decisions that may not always involve other people in the decision making, right? You may hear about the decision, but you weren't there with them as they were grappling with it, trying to take into consideration different things. And so I think when you're able to then have a better balance between, hey, I want to make this decision, but what do I want to get your input on this. Not to say it may automatically change my decision, but I at least want you to be well aware of what's happening, why things are happening, versus blind leadership where it's just like, we just gonna do whatever you tell us. And if you tell us to go off the bridge, we're gonna go off the bridge. That's why we're getting off the bridge. Is it because the bridge is about to burn down and the only option we have is to jump? Right? Like, there's context behind all of this. And I think that's the part that's important and needed to then flow into a connection, both sexually, sensually, with your partner, and still feel like there's not a disconnect between the times when you're in command of your family and in command of your bedroom, whatever way that may be. They still all come together. They're not so distinct, unless you're into other things, which is also possible too. So
consensual dominance.
Consensual dominance. Yes.
I mean, and I'll say this, like, regardless of how someone decides to, balance out their relationship, with power dynamics, because it's going to look different. It should look different because everyone involved in that relationship is, it's like, these are different people with different skills and qualities, et cetera, desires. And we should be empowered to really, figure that out, and for our relationships, marital or otherwise, looking like one that is healthy for the people actually involved in it. And with that, more important than who is in command of the relationship is whether or not you're in command of yourself. Because if not,
drop the mic.
Then what's the point?
I know. What's the point? Woo! We're gonna leave it there.
Well, y'all, I enjoy this thoroughly, and honestly, I talk to my brother all the time about all this stuff, and we hope that you are learning, being encouraged, enjoying the conversation, and look forward to even more of your commentary. Where do you fall on the scale when it comes to having this conversation? What do you think? How has he thinks played out in your relationships, whether you're single or married? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We would love to see them. And thanks for being here. Thanks for helping us grow this podcast. And share it with a friend. Share it on your socials. Maybe it sparks conversation in your community. So as always, you know what I'm about to say. Be as radiant as the sun. Yes. And we will see you next week. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.